What's going on, folks? Ted from Nerd Immersion here, and I'm going to answer a question several of you have asked of me in the past. Now, I've talked about this a little bit here and there, but I thought I could make this a maybe potentially an ongoing series, but many of you are interested in the story of how I got into Dungeons and Dragons, and more so, how did my first campaign that I ever played in back in 2004, how did it go? What was it like? What did I play? What did my friends play? What was my experience like? And honestly, now feels like a good time to tell that story. So, without further ado, I'm going to roll into, I think we got to give you a little bit of history first, right? So before we talk about what happened with the campaign, let me give you a little history on my understanding of what Dungeons and Dragons is and how I actually came about interested in playing it and what led to me creating that first character. Before I dive into that, though, I have the perfect sponsor for this wonderful Saturday morning series we're going to have, and that's our good friends over at Magic Spoon. If you're anything like me, one of your favorite parts about Saturday morning used to be getting up early, grabbing that bowl full of cereal, and sitting down to watch your favorite Saturday morning cartoons. Unfortunately, as we've all grown up, a lot of that has become a thing of the past. Saturday morning cartoons are no longer a thing. And honestly, cereal doesn't really feel like it fits in my lifestyle now, especially the sugary cereals I used to eat when I was younger. But thankfully, we have our good friend here, Magic Spoon, which is cereal reinvented, allowing me to have all of the nostalgia, taste, and sweetness that I used to have growing up, but basically with none of the regret. It says it on every box of Magic Spoon, but I'm going to read this bit off here for you. High protein, keto friendly, gluten free, grain free, soy free, wheat free, and naturally flavored. It also, each serving, 140 calories, 0 grams of sugar, 13 to 14 grams of protein, and only 4 net carbs. You don't have to feel guilty about eating what tastes like the sugary cereal we ate growing up. This is the variety pack that you can see here, and it has 4 different flavors that, again, will mimic a lot of your favorite cereals. We have cocoa, fruity, frosted, and out of this set, my personal favorite here is the peanut butter. But if you head over to Magic Spoon's website, they have a variety of other flavors for those of you that might be looking for something more sweet or a little bit different. Birthday cake, maple waffle, blueberry, and even really rotating seasonal flavors. Like, it looks like there's an upcoming pumpkin flavor, which if you're anything like me and are super basic, you definitely need to get that in the rotation. I also really like this because I have kids and it tastes like all the sugary cereals that they want to eat, but I can feel comfortable knowing that they're getting the protein that they need by eating this and not any of the sugar. Also, it's great, and obviously you see a lot of other creators out there when they talk about Magic Spoon using it with a bowl and milk, which obviously takes it to another level. But one of the best, in my opinion, markers of a cereal is if it's good, just eat it out of the box when it's dry. Again, having kids, cereal in a Ziploc bag is definitely something we end up doing a lot more often for quick meals or stuffed snacks and on the go to school or things like that. So again, there's the variety pack where you can get 4 different options. You can go on the site and pick out specific flavors. But I have a link down in the description. You can grab that variety pack and try it today. Be sure to head over and use the promo code NERDIMMERSION at checkout to get $5 off any order, or go to magicspoon.com/nerdimmersion. Magic Spoon is so confident with their product, it's backed with a 100% happiness guarantee. So if you don't like it for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. So click the link, scan the QR code that's right here. It's been on screen the whole time, and use the code NERDIMMERSION for $5 off, or go to magicspoon.com/nerdimmersion to save $5 today. Once again, a huge thank you and shout out to Magic Spoon for sponsoring this video. I've actually been using Magic Spoon on my own before they reached out for a while, and I just love the product, and it was awesome that they reached out to work together. So yeah, like I said, it's great cereal, and you don't have to feel guilty about eating sugar cereal. And when you sit down to watch your Saturday morning Nerd Immersion show where we talk about the nostalgia of the past of Dungeons and Dragons, why not do it with a bowl of Magic Spoon? So I think it only makes sense before we start about what happened in the first couple sessions. Really, we're going to focus mostly on the build-up, the first session, and a little bit beyond that. But I think it's important that we talk about how I got into Dungeons and Dragons and kind of the process leading up to that. So I was probably about 13 years old, I think, when I first heard of Dungeons and Dragons. But mind you, I had no idea what it was, right? I didn't know what a tabletop RPG was. My only concept of RPGs were video games. And the only video game RPGs that I had really played, because again, when I'm 13, I think the Nintendo 64 is just coming out. I realize I'm probably dating myself here, but either way. So like this, we're talking Chrono Trigger, Super Mario RPG, because RPG is literally in the name of it, and then Pokemon, right? And all I could tell from those examples, is that RPGs equals turn-based combat. You're walking around an overworld, you bump into an enemy somehow, and you go into a battle scene. That is what I understand RPGs to be. But I didn't really understand that Dungeons and Dragons was a tabletop RPG. I just knew it was a game you could play, and that dragons and dungeons, and it was a general overarching fantasy thing. The only concept my parents had was my mother had heard about the Satanic Panic. She wasn't forbidding me from playing the game at all. She just wasn't encouraging it because that's all she knew about it. And then it kind of just went away, right? I just kind of put it in the back of my mind. I think I might have casually mentioned it to someone on the bus, and they actually brought out their like a couple days later, showed me their second edition character sheet for like the thief that they'd made. And I was like, that's cool. Still no concept of like that it's a paper character sheet and like you have stuff on it. Just didn't understand what it was. Later on, he showed me his monster manual, and like I was like, oh, cool, monsters. Like that's a thing. Still didn't understand how the game worked. And then again, it just kind of went away. Now, one thing that you should know too about my time in high school was when the Lord of the Rings, Peter Jackson Lord of the Rings movies were coming out. Now, I hadn't really been exposed to Tolkien at all. I never read The Hobbit or any of that stuff growing up. So my first exposure to any of the works of Tolkien was The Fellowship of the Ring, when I saw that in theaters, and then subsequently Two Towers, Return of the King later on. And it obviously, for all of us who were in high school at that time as teenagers, these were very formative years shaping movies, right? These were some of the biggest films of all time. A lot of people were being again introduced to these works for the first time via this. And then you also find out in the process that, you've got dwarves, you've got elves, you got all this stuff, and that Dungeons and Dragons is very similar in a lot of ways to this. It was obviously reinvigorating that interest in Dungeons and Dragons with me. Again, as we've mentioned, you've seen the bow in the background. We've talked about it, that I've been an archer my whole life. And obviously being somebody who hunts and fishes very kind of woodsy and outdoorsy, at least at that point in my life, had a very strong concept with Legolas being an archer and all this kind of stuff. So I was like, yeah, this is the character that I sort of connect with. And all I knew is that in that process that like if there was a game that let me attempt to do this kind of stuff, I'd love to play that. And, ipso facto learning through stuff that Dungeons and Dragons would be the best way to do it. And it's somewhere in that time frame I'd also learned kind of what a TTRPG was and how they're played, but still, again, no concept of how to get a chance to play one of these. Also, it'll come up later, so I'll mention it now. We had also, YouTube was in its infancy at this point. Again, feel like I'm dating myself here. But we had found what's called, you can search it still on YouTube, I'll put a link in the description, called 8-Bit D&D. And that was essentially the kind of Dead Alewives comedy group taking their comedy bits about Dungeons and Dragons, and it was put to the sprites of some of the older Final Fantasy games. And the most important one that so many of you probably know or have heard before is, I cast magic missile at the darkness. I had seen that video. And I think I even wrote later on in my high school career, my senior year, I think I wrote a paper for my English class about like debunking the concept of different fantasy, like the concepts of fantasy being detrimental to people's, health. Right? I mentioned, I cited Dungeons and Dragons as being like all about worshiping Satan. And I think I even cited that particular video as like, this is what it's really like. It's not, any of that kind of stuff. But anyway, I remember it very clearly. I was in fourth period lunch in a gray, hazy, overcast day. Maybe a little bit of rain, just sitting there eating lunch. And one of my friends who I'd known for about 6 years at this point came and sat at kind of the head of the table and just kind of looked around at everybody and just went like, "Hey, do you guys want to play Dungeons and Dragons?" And I was like, "Oh my God, yes. So much do I want to play Dungeons and Dragons." And he was like, "Cool, meet me in the library, eighth period, and we'll make your character." Now, folks, when I tell you that I was like a very straight edge, straight A student, goody little two shoes in high school and all of grade school, that is very much true. I don't think I'd ever skipped a class in my entire life. And I still to this day do not remember what I had eighth period that day. But I tell you, I was in that library, sitting at that table, making that character. And the DM told us, but we'll just go call his name is Nick, so we'll call him Nick. Nick said, we're going to start at 6th level. So, we can build your character. And he was teaching me kind of how you do, add the different things. To determine my stats, we actually used a graphing calculator dice generator, right? Graphing calculators were obviously a thing we needed in high school, and downloading games and stuff on your graphing calculator was all the rage. So somebody had a dice roller on their graphing calculator, so we used that to roll my ability scores. And then we kind of built it. And what I landed on was 4 levels of Ranger, because I wanted to be a Ranger, which again, if you're a 5th edition fan and know me from that, you're like, what the hell are you doing? You hate Rangers. Well, I didn't back then. And I wanted to have that woodsy concept, outdoorsy person who would also, you could focus basically in that game on 2-weapon fighting or ranged with archery. So I said, oh, I want to be an archer, live up to my kind of dreams of being Legolas. I'll be a wood elf. But I also want to take 2 levels of wizard because essentially I want to be able to cast magic missile at the darkness. Horribly optimized in terms of the game, but that's what I decided. And then we came to the decision. This was like a Tuesday. This coming Saturday, we're going to play for the first time. The ultimate breakdown was, Nick and his younger brother, who's going to be playing a half-nymph sorcerer, myself as Aramil, the wood elf ranger wizard, and our other friend was going to be playing a half-elf monk. And we decided we're going to meet on Saturday, and we're going to meet at our local library, and that's where we're going to play. So Saturday morning, I wake up, excited, nervous, don't know what to do. Get myself some breakfast, go teach youth archery in the morning, and then drive over to my one friend's house, the DM Nick, and pick him and his younger brother up and drive over to the local library where we meet our third friend. We go inside, we find a table kind of right in the middle. We sit down to start playing, and that's when the DM drops the bomb. Hey guys, I think I lost your character sheets. We'd all given the character sheets to the DM, and we were like, oh, okay. And he's like, but that's fine. We'll just play without him. If it comes up, we'll just have to make something up, and eventually we'll like update those character sheets. Which again, I think the openness and the willing to just kind of make things work is my first DM experience, was really formative in the way I play Dungeons and Dragons, and just like willing to allow me to do different things. It's like, you know what, we'll make it up as we go. We'll figure stuff out if we have to. Let's just play the game. And that's, a really great mentality, especially for somebody who's learning the game for the first time. You just want to get in and play it. So DM sets the scene. The 3 of us are in a sleeping. We all are. I don't know if we all have our own rooms upstairs in a tavern. My character's a wood elf, doesn't really sleep, wakes up from trance to head downstairs to the bar. The bar is pretty active at this point in the day, even though it's early morning. And I'm a 17-year-old, never been drunk in my life at this point, and I wanted to enjoy and be a dumb 17-year-old. So I said, I get drunk. The DM says, all right, so you go ahead, you start pounding back drinks, and you end up getting inebriated. You are drunk now. At some point, the rest of the party comes down the stairs, and then we realize that we're supposed to have a meeting with the king at a time and place that only my character knows, and my character is now sloppy drunk. And I remember we go out into the streets. The half-nymph sorcerer ends up trying to haggle with this guy over the price of some melons for a while. And somehow that leads as a distraction to him basically acquiring us horses that me and the monk think are just purchased, but they're actually stolen from the messengers from a nearby town. We don't know this right now. They throw me over the back of the horse and they leave and kind of head up towards the castle. I remember very distinctly that my character threw up and they used my character's cloak to wipe off my own puke. So then I had a puke stained cloak. We make our way up to the castle. We realize that we're bearing messenger horses from a nearby kingdom, and that when we look at the message, we realize that we're bringing a declaration of war from a nearby village to this town, when we really just had some other meeting to discuss something that I don't think we ever found out what it was. So we realize we're like, we can't bring this declaration of war. Like, we don't stand for, like, let's have them take our horses to the stable. We don't stand a chance at, like, we can't defend this. We don't know anything about this other town. We can't be bringing a declaration of war. What if they try to kill us for bringing the declaration of war here as, like, killing the messenger situation? So we're like, all right, we go in, we meet with the king, and I don't remember why we were going to meet there in the first place, but we convinced the king that the other kingdom is, like, really bad and a bunch of jerks, and you should declare war on them. We'll deliver the message to them. We got you. So somehow that happens. We end up leaving, and all I remember is I think a stable boy or somebody, stable hand, had found the declaration of war, and being a bunch of, like, 17-year-old murder hobos, we take our horses and we set the barn on fire to leave no evidence. I think it was a flaming sphere from the sorcerer got rolled around inside there to kill the stable hand, as well as to hide the evidence of the declaration of war. So then we just fled. Now, at about this point, we're laughing, we're having a good time, and the librarian comes over and says, sorry, you guys have to leave. And they kicked us out of the library for being too rowdy playing Dungeons and Dragons at, like, 12 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon. But either way. So then my buddy, our monk friend here, says, hey, I don't live that far away. We can play in my basement. So we all hop in our cars, drive over to his house, and go down into the basement. And it ends up being the perfect place to play Dungeons and Dragons. It's a finished basement. It's really nice. And the DM says, you know what? Maybe since we kind of have to take a break at this point, maybe we should remake our character sheets now so we have them for whenever we go to play next time. So everybody sits down. The DM has basically, you guys have all seen the meme of the Rock with a giant bag full of books. My buddy Nick had this big duffel bag, like army duffel bag, that he would just load up with all of his books. And mind you, I drove at this point in my life an extended cab pickup truck. So me and him in the front seat, and then in the little bit of the extended cab is his younger brother and this giant duffel bag full of books. So we're all going through, we're making our characters, and this is that character sheet. The one from 2004, the one we made in my friend's basement. This is it. This is Aramil, my wood elf. Well, we'll talk about his class in a little bit here. But this is that. And then again, these are subsequent character sheets and things that he had, but I'll explain what those all are in a little while. I mean, this was his, is this his? No, this is cleric stuff. I was gonna say I had like a whole sheet with all of his spells and stuff on it too, like a separate page. But anyway, we made our character sheets, and that pretty much closed us out for session 1. So now what we'll have to do is jump into what happened in session 2. And I think this is a little bit, we've kind of established a background. Now we know where we're meeting. We know what we're going to do. We all meet up. We go to my friend's house. We're going to actually play now. So we're traveling along on our way to the other town to bring our declaration of war from this kingdom. And we end up hearing that it's a little rough going from people on the road to get from here to there. There's been a lot of different animal attacks. You should probably hire a guide. So we hire a guide. I can't remember the guy's original name, but we're just going to call him Gregor. And he's like a cantankerous old man, but clearly corded and muscled. Like, this guy knows what he's doing. He can take a hit. He's been around for a while. We are immediately ingratiated to this character. Everybody loves him. I don't remember why, but we just were. And I think it's because he wielded two weapons, like two full-size weapons. I think that just kind of, I don't know, seemed badass to us. So that kind of, after we kind of meet Gregor, that night we're traveling. We stop to make camp for the night, and the DM introduces us to, what he calls a campfire session, which is something I still use to this day. And he says this is an opportunity for all of us to talk to each other. Now, we've been traveling for a while. We know each other. You all know each other. But this is an opportunity for you to give us the kind of the backstory of your character. We're all sitting around a campfire. Tell us a campfire tale about how your character came to be. You don't have to tell us everything. You don't only have to tell us what you want, but this is an opportunity for you to share that with everybody. You might have already shared this with these characters in, previous to you playing the game, but this is an opportunity for you to share that with, all the other players. And I remember going through, I don't really remember much of the monk's story. I remember, obviously, the half-nymph story. You could probably figure out how that went to happen. But I remember my character being 4 levels of ranger, 2 levels of wizard was weird. It would have made sense, I think, in my head if I'd started off as a wizard and decided that I didn't feel strong enough as a wizard, that I needed to focus my training somewhere else to have myself be a little bit stronger to survive in the wild, to then, go into ranger. But because I started with a ranger and then went into wizard, it didn't really make a lot of sense. And again, the only reason I wanted to have levels in wizard was literally so I could cast magic missile, because I could cast magic missile at the darkness. And I even think in that moment I realized, maybe that's not the best character choice. So I said to the DM, hey, would you be cool if I switch my character to just be 6 levels of ranger instead? And without a hesitation, he said, absolutely, no problem at all. Go ahead and do that. And I think that, yet again, was another extremely formative dungeon mastering moment for me. And that I asked a question that potentially he had every right to say, no, this is your character, you can stick with it. Now, it is my first game, and I feel like you're a little, or second game, really, you're a little lenient there. But without hesitation, he was willing to work with me on everything and was just like, yeah, absolutely, you can be a level 6 ranger, not a problem. And I think in the process of me writing out all the ranger stuff and seeing the things that I got for being a ranger, we played a little bit more, and I was like, actually, sorry, I hate to do this again, guys. Would it be cool if I just become a level 6 druid instead? Because druids get an animal companion. They get a lot of the magic that I couldn't really, that the wizard would kind of give me. I get some different kinds of magic, but I get magic. I'll also have healing, which is something nobody in the party has. And I'll still get to be all woodsy and in tune with nature. Is that cool? And he was like, absolutely, no problem. Go ahead and make the change. So that is where Aramil, my wood elf druid, officially came into his own. I think we might have ended up, I don't remember if we were level 7 or not. I think I actually misread part of it. But he also said you get an animal companion, and that led to the creation of this character sheet, which was Bob, my giant crocodile. And this was my absolute favorite. Just, I don't know. For whatever reason, crocodiles in Dungeons and Dragons 3rd edition were aquatic creatures, meaning they obviously would be in the water, whereas giant crocodiles were not listed as aquatic. So he could travel around on land. Granted, his movement speed was only 20 feet a turn, but he had a ridiculous amount of HP, a high AC, and could just do a ton of damage. So he was a badass, and I had to have that. And that changed everything. We had to worship a deity, and Obud High, we were kind of, I guess, set in a Greyhawk setting. Obud High is a god of nature, but for some reason my DM said his name was Obi-Wan. Don't know why. And without, I thought he was joking, but no, he was being flat out serious that my god's name was Obi-Wan. And I was like, you really speaking my language here, dude. I worship Obi-Wan, and I'm a druid, and I can use a bow and all this other cool stuff. Loved it. So then, we talking to Gregor, and Gregor says, hey, listen, if we push through the night, we can be at the town you guys want to be at to, by sunup. And he said, it's pretty nice out here. It's a beautiful night, nice full moon in the sky. Lots of things to see by. Again, I have low light vision as an elf, so full moon gives me plenty of vision here. And he said, it should be easy going. Won't have to worry about traffic jams or any people on the road or bandits or anything. Why don't we just push through the night and we'll make it to the next town? And I think everybody here is like, yeah, that seems pretty reasonable. Sure. And he's like, but before we do, I just want to give you guys something. And he hands me a quiver of silver tipped arrows and gives the monk a set of silver brass knuckles. And he's like, just, you watch him take out his other swords and swap them for 2 silver swords. And he says, it's just in case, just a precaution. And we have a wagon. We're all sitting in the back of the wagon. Gregor's driving the wagon. We have 1 horse pulling it down the road. And then the DM says, as you're making your way down the road, you can see, you have kind of a hill on your left-hand side. And all of a sudden, you don't hear crickets anymore. This kind of early morning stillness. Everything is quiet. You can almost hear the wind moving the blades of grass as a slight breeze comes through. This breeze moves the clouds out of the way, kind of opening up the sky to show off this large full moon shining down. I'm actually getting goosebumps right now describing this. Silver light over the entire area. When you look, you hear pounding of footsteps, and you look to your left at the top of this hill, and you see cresting that hill what first looks like a pack of wolves until they all stand up on their back legs and let out a baying howl to the sky before they come bounding down the hill as a pack of 5 werewolves descend upon your party. Go ahead and roll for initiative. And I was losing my shit over this. This was the coolest thing that had ever happened to me right now. I was so excited. I was like, oh, what do? I don't want to turn into a werewolf, or maybe I do. I don't know if that's good or bad or how that works. And I'm like freaking out, and I'm just like, I don't know what's going on. So I remember our sorcerer leapt out to hide behind the wagon to fire off scorching rays at them. And our monk, which I felt was like an idiotic move, leapt up into the fray to start punching and kicking stuff. And Gregor, I think, was like a frenzied berserker, and he just goes into a rage and leaps off, 2 swords into the midst of this. And I'm over there firing off arrows from a distance. Bob making his way into the midst of things with his bite attack was 2d8 plus 12 damage. And his tail attack was a d12 plus 12 damage. Bob was a monster, right? He could do a ton of work when it came to combat. And I just remember, like I said, I can see the room that we're sitting in, sitting down to play this. And I can remember the map, right? We had the old white, gridded map that came in the back of the 3.5 Dungeon Master's Guide. And, with our cart. And, like, our minis, we didn't have minis, right? We were using, like, whatever we had laying around. Like, we got, like, a quarter. This is, like, a rock. Maybe this is a piece of old popcorn. I think I've talked about it before, but my miniature for Bob, as he was 15 feet long, was a piece of knotted up rainbow string that I found in my basement. I think I have it. Hang on. It's over here somewhere, I think. Oh, I don't know. I'll find it. And I showed it off before, but I'll show it off if I find it here in a little bit. But it was basically just, a piece of knotted up rainbow string. And that was one of my most cherished minis of all time because it represented my giant crocodile. And all I know is we ended up defeating the werewolves, and I was so ecstatic. Unfortunately, though, Gregor got bit by one of the werewolves in his frenzied rage, making his way through all of these werewolves. And he was our guide and also the driver. So I think, if I recall, the horse got cut loose or killed in the process that was pulling the carriage. And I remember we had to put Gregor in the back, and his wound was like festering. And we're like, we got to get him to a healer. We got to figure out, we don't know how long lycanthropy takes to take set. We got to get out of here. Plus, there could be more. So I remember I wild shaped for the first time into a horse so that we could attach the carriage to me and I could pull us to the next location as we looked desperately for some sort of healer who could bring Gregor's potential budding lycanthropy to a close before anything bad happened to us or anybody else. So I think that's a pretty good spot to end this story time. Let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comments down below. Like I said, if you want to see these character sheets, let me know. I'll take like a close up, as best of pictures as I can of all the different sides of the character sheets, and I'll upload them here to the YouTube community tab or to social media so you guys can check them out. And then again, if I find a picture, if I find Bob the mini, I'll show you guys that. But yeah, thank you again to our good friends at Magic Spoon for sponsoring this awesome Saturday morning delve into the history of Ted from Nerd Immersion's Dungeons and Dragons. I think this is a lot of fun. I'm getting goosebumps and loving the nostalgia of reliving this. So if you would like to hear more about what happened next, did Gregor's lycanthropy get cured? Did I change my character again? What happens next? Did we ever deliver the declaration of war? If you want to know any of that stuff, let me know, and I will continue this series talking about what happened as we get a little bit further through the campaign. So thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.